And we've been following this breaking news throughout the morning. The strike that has grounded Air Canada flights and passengers for days appears to be over.
All right, let's continue our analysis this morning, bringing in Sprott School of Management Associate Professor Ian Lee. Ian, good to talk to you this morning. You know, when we first met at the newsroom this morning, the strike wasn't over, and we were thinking about what we might ask you about where this may be going. We now have a sense that it's going to be ending. What is your sense here of what it took to get Air Canada and its flight attendants to agree to this and this whole situation surrounding ground pay in particular?
Well, I think both sides were feeling the pressure, the increasingly heavy pressure behind the scenes from the government of Canada. They're the regulator. The government of Canada regulates this industry. They don't regulate prices anymore. That ended with deregulation way back in the 80s. But that does not mean that the government of Canada or the U.S. government in the States, for that matter, does not have a role in the transportation sector, and more specifically airlines, as we've seen with the power of the Section 107 of the Labor Code to intervene. So I think that they felt the heat. Air Canada knew the public opinion was not on their side. And of course, they don't want to alienate their customers. I'm sure the government, in fact, that the minister was hinting, about unpaid work, that she was going to regulate this through amendments to the Labor Code. So that put heat on the Air Canada side. And so I'm not shocked at all or surprised that they finally came to an agreement.
Yeah, and when we spoke to you earlier this week, Professor Lee, you predicted that the federal government would step in and this would happen, invoking Section 107 of the Labor Code. But what we didn't really anticipate was the flight attendants, CUPE, would dig in their heels and refuse to go back to work. So they obviously had enough leverage. What kind of precedent do you think this sets for future strikes going forward, and when the government decides again to invoke something like Section 107?
I think that's an incredibly important question you've just asked. I mean, this is not the first time they've invoked 107. As I showed in my paper, Striking Out, the successive parliaments, successive governments from 1950 to now have legislated striking workers in the transportation sector 45 times. This one was the 45th because she did issue the order. And so the fact that the union, in this instance, CUPE, has finally pushed back against these directives, and very aggressively so, I think was a shot across the bow of the government of Canada. They realized that the status quo of every time there's a strike in transportation sector, just whip out Section 107 and send them back to work, is running out of steam, because the union movement is saying, hey, look, this is illegal. It violates the Supreme Court decision. So I think this is going to cause the government to act in some way to amend the Labor Code to deal with these issues, perhaps designating ports, railroads, airlines as essential services, as are the emergency services workers at airports already, by the way.
All right, it is pretty fascinating. Professor Lee, we appreciate your insight and analysis as always. And again, you called it. You said what was going to happen, and here we are. The strike is over. Good to chat this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. Thanks very much, Jen.
Okay.